Kia ora koutou katoa. I am Simon Bowden in here on the Goss, a weekly show on the Aotearoa Arts and Events during the COVID-19 crisis Facebook page group, going and exploring different things that are happening in the arts. Now, we were just listening to Glass Mountain, which is off the Covid Colab album, and that featured Caroline Bay, bass and vocals, Benjamin James on drums, Annabel Alpers on synths and voice, Tom Watson guitars, and Sam Scott, I assume Sam Scott from Phoenix Foundation, on synth and mix. And the Covid Colab is available on Bandcamp. And it's a beautiful album, and I highly suggest that you get it. And if you're into vinyl, then that is available from Bandcamp too. Welcome to my kia ora koutou, welcome to my wonderful guests on the Goss today. We are going to be, of course, this is the first of a two-part mini-series looking at capacity building. Capacity building is a term used by a lot of funders, and it focuses on the capacity of organisations to grow their future, to look at their strength, look at their strategy perhaps, build new ideas, new facility for a stronger future for that organisation. And then if you put it all together, if all of the organisations get a chance to do it, then the whole sector is stronger. And Creative New Zealand has some extra money available for capacity building and has set up a couple of programs for its investment clients. But artists and projects and groups out there that are interested in capacity building that are not investment clients of Creative New Zealand can in fact apply to CNZ through an arts grant for a capacity building project, which many organisations did during the arts continuity funding that was available from CNZ during the lockdown period. And also the Ministry of Arts, Culture and Heritage has $12 million that is earmarked for capacity building in the creative sector, except there's no details on how they're going to spend that yet. So the reason that we're having this conversation is to meet these three wonderful people and three wonderful people next week to hear a bit about their programs and what they're doing for their organisations, and using that information to hopefully inspire others out there to think about how they might approach their programs as well. And then for us to collectively consider the overall impact of everybody doing this work. That's the mission. You up for it, team? I'll get you to introduce yourselves. I'll go my right to left. So we'll start with Lauren Whitney. Welcome, Lauren.
Hello, how are you? Ko Lauren Whitney, taku ingoa. I'm from the New Zealand Comedy Trust, and we were established in 1995 to, I guess, elevate the New Zealand comedy industry, or help create a professional comedy industry, but elevate comedy as an integral art form and a celebrated art form in New Zealand. We create a lot of opportunities to, I guess, build on the craft. We create a stage through the New Zealand International Comedy Festival for which to perform, and we build kind of connections and collaborations, and we're really trying to build a sustainable and representative comedy industry. And if we're successful in that, we will be dynamic and resilient, and we'll have a really successful and sustainable industry in New Zealand that celebrates comedy.
Great. And New Zealanders will be enlightened through the power of laughter.
It's true. We will be connected, we'll be enlightened, we'll be challenged, all of the things. So it's a great genre to work in, and I'm very passionate about it. I've been there for 11 years. So it's a really nice, it's obviously been a very challenging year. I'm very sad to have to cancel a festival, which takes as much work to undo as to create, apparently, as if you actually do one. So but it's a much sadder version. However, you know, on the positive side, and I think you have to look at the opportunities, is there has been some opportunities to take a beat and to have a little bit of a look at what we're doing and what we're thinking about right now and moving forward.
Yeah, and hearing you on the unproducing, Meg Williams from New Zealand Festivals coined that term, unproducing. Welcome, Leo G. Peters.
Mute. There you go, takes me a minute. Kia ora koutou. My name is Leo Jean Peters. I'm from San Antonio, Texas originally, and I've lived in Wellington for 18 years now. I run a company called The Slightly Isolated Dog. And we are a performance company primarily, where we create theater works that attempt to kind of break the relationship between the audience and the performers, or not break it, but like, yeah, preferably not break it, but to shift the relationship and to try to get great work that doesn't feel like theater or look like theater, and is trying to engage people into a sort of different kind of event. And we've been touring for the last several years now. We've been touring our shows, Don Juan and Jekyll and Hyde, internationally and around New Zealand, and then internationally. And we've worked in a lot of different kinds of capacities, and have done a lot of kind of capacity building work on our own back over the many years of trying to do things. And then that led us to be artists in residence at Creative HQ for several years, where we were, and then out of us being there, and then some other artists in Wellington, Joe Anderson and Claire Maybe, chatting with Meg Williams of Tuffety, we came together with Mel Hamilton as well, and H.J. Kilkelly, and formed a group which is kind of loosely called the Pornicky Artists. Well, formed a group of independent artists in Wellington. And we've created, we're in the process of creating a program called PI, or Pornicky Artist Intensive, which is a arts accelerator program for independent companies in Wellington. And yes, in those two capacities, I think I'm here today.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jean. Thanks very much for that. And Dan, so sorry, Jean's in Wellington, Lauren's in Auckland, and Dan is in Auckland too, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, up here in Tamaki. Yes, hi, kia ora, Feskanma, Ishmisha Daniel Goodwin, and from Scotland originally, so very thankful to be in Tamaki at the moment. Yeah, I am a whānau member of Torima Vibes, which is a brokerage company based here in Auckland, and basically what that means is we do work which tries to connect different spaces and different artist communities together, especially those communities that are kind of tackling stories or experiences connect with lived experience, whether that be cultural, mental health. Yeah, so that's kind of what we do. And we have just recently taken over Fringe Festival as well up here in Auckland. So we are now leading and navigating Auckland Fringe up here.
Kia ora. And how many people in the group, Dan?
So there is 5 of us. We've just gone through a process of bringing on a few extra members onto our team, which is very, very exciting. We're in the middle of building a wellness resource at the moment, Te Whakawhiranaki Keti. So we've brought on a couple of new members to help us with research for that, which will hopefully eventuate in an online kind of hub of well-being resources available to artists in a couple of years. And we're a team of 5, I believe, at the moment. Yeah.
Wonderful. So a resource for the whole community, which will grow the capacity of all of us if we're well. We know how to access resources to keep us well.
Hopefully. Here's hoping.
Yeah. Great. Excellent. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining the Goss this week. Let's dive right in, and let's start by exploring the project that you're working on at the moment, and just letting us in on some of the elements, the stage of it, because you might not be finished, you might not even be started yet, you might be halfway through, and some of the experiences you're having around tackling the issues and doing the thought process to get the outcomes you want. And we'll start with you, Lauren. Oh, she's gone. We can't start with Lauren, she's gone. Hopefully she'll be back soon. We'll start with you, Jean.
Cool. We are, I guess I'll speak to Pi first. Pi is in the process of developing. We came together in the middle of last year, so April of last year, And we did a design sprint at Creative HQ, which is a sort of week-long intensive to try to work through what problems that the sector has, and to try to consult with a whole bunch of people, and then try to understand, create a process that would understand the problems, and then try to articulate some ways of working with them. And so we consulted, I think, about like between 30 and 40 independent practitioners from across the country, in one day or in one morning, and then from there sort of consolidated a lot of the things that people were saying, which is a lot of the same things that we have said for many years, that there's not enough resource for capacity building or capability building. There's a very clear kind of glass ceiling for mid-range artists, or mid-career artists, what you call people who are sort of more experienced, but not like there's this sort of stopping point for most people where they just sort of burn out, or they have to get into the job to raise families or whatnot, and that there's not there's a need to try to connect broader. Both with the existing community, but also to connect and to be more sort of public, I guess, or more prominent in public awareness, both the artists and the arts. So we created, in that course, we sort of created a pilot and tested it out with some key stakeholders for an arts accelerator program. And that was PI, and PI's the three main outcomes is to, like, what is it? These are my notes. I should know that one actually by heart. It's looking at giving artists, like, developing our ability to improve sustainability, or developing sustainability for companies. So basically trying to work with artists so that we can find new ways of earning money, or improve ways that we have now of earning money. And that's one of the major outcomes. Another is about community building in the arts in Wellington. And the third is about sort of working towards financial stability, but also like entrepreneurial thinking, through entrepreneurial thinking. So taking ourselves seriously as businesses, without tipping over into that commercialization thing, with that thing where it becomes, we go against what we actually want to make, the art that we want to make in order to make a living, or to make more commercial kind of work.
So Jean, is the program a program that you've entered into just for the participants in the program, or are you setting out to try and create some solutions that any independent practitioner in Wellington can access?
There's a combination. So where we are now with the program itself is we are developing the program that will, it's been supported by Wellington City Council and Wellington NZ, and it's going to be worked in combination between, it's in collaboration between Creative HQ and the group of us that are now part of the Pointy Artist Intensive group. We're developing the program, which will be 8 weeks, sometime probably roughly September, October. So we're about to call for applicants for it in probably a couple weeks' time. And the notion is that obviously the program would be very much for the participants that are involved, the cohort of participants that are involved, which is 10 independent artists or companies. But at the same time, we're looking at developing some tools for, like, developing a toolkit as well, which is, we've already developed some pieces for that, like an arts one-pager, or like kind of using, the main idea is to use kind of Creative HQ's sort of startup tools, but to lean them over into an arts kind of perspective.
So you're, so it's really interesting that you've engaged Creative HQ. You've centered this in Creative HQ, and you said at the start that the relationship began because you were artists in residence in Creative HQ. If anyone was wondering what Creative HQ is, it's one of those accelerator programs for startup businesses.
Yeah.
So the business paradigm, how's it working for practitioners?
It's, well, I mean, we haven't, this is like, it's a prototype thing now. And we're just going into the first go at it. The notion is that I think we're feeling like the group that's come together of artists are definitely, we're all sort of mid-level or whatever. We're not emerging anymore, and we've all hit points where we just run out of both ability and steam, and the processes are no longer like really feasible, or not feasible, they're just not sustainable.
Not sustainable.
Yeah. And so like the cool thing is about kind of like trying to shift mindset, so that like the people that we're after for the program are people that want to come and try to understand like how we can do things a little bit different to make ourselves give ourselves better opportunities, more opportunities to connect more with people, and to like kind of give ourselves more chance to different ways of making money. That we have skills, we all have, artists have a lot of skills in a lot of different areas. So it's a strange kind of thing, because we're not trying to like, the program is very much artist led. So like we've made it to where there's going to be a framework, and there's some things that the cohort will do together as a group. But for the most part, it is very much like an autonomous kind of program where if you come on the program, you develop a discrete kind of thing that you would need. So if you desperately need accounting skills, then you can work in that area. If you desperately need vision planning and that kind of thing, and you'll work in that area. If you need to figure out how to diversify whatever and get more partners involved, or whatever your kind of specific needs are, or if you don't really know your needs and you need to explore them and then try to figure that out. Like, the program is very much participant led, so that it's trying to not be one of these programs that I think we've all been on, where there's a business course offered and you go, but it's not really for artists. And they don't really understand the mindset that we're working in, so you probably get some useful tools, but at the end of the day, you're kind of a little bit disappointed and you walk away a little bit.
Gene, how much, I mean, you've just talked about how you might be able to recognize some gaps in different participants' skill base and knowledge base, and then obviously if you can improve those gaps, then you've got a more effective, more well-run, more efficient business to play in a marketplace that exists. And the marketplace exists between ticket sales to endorsements and partnerships and business opportunities and funding and that entire sort of ecosystem. But how much of the program that you're entered into is trying to look for brand new models, brand new, how are you collectively or independently empowered to look for disruption?
Definitely. I think that's like, for my money, that's the thing I'm most interested in and why I'm involved in it. And I think the others involved as well would be similarly yes. We're very much trying to go like, how do we, in terms of like, how do we radically shift what we do to change how we live and how we make a living. And we've had a Slightly Isolated Dog has had like a long time. For a while, we've been trying to do this kind of work where we're moving into like business development things, and so we've done a bit of work with Creative HQ there over the years, and to try to diversify and sort of build our capability to work in that arena as well. And then as well as that, like, obviously lots of work in the community sector, as a lot of artists do, and I mean, a big part of this has been about like, trying to brainstorm around how we radically shift how we can work, and the kind of partnerships we can build. Because there's a large thing, there's a sort of traditional sponsorship model of like, I go out and I tell you, give me money because I'm valuable to you. My art is valuable to you. But like, that's like not really a like tenable model really, because now, especially with the way businesses run now, people want more. If they're going to sponsor things, businesses want to be involved, and they want it to be something that they believe in, and that it's important that their people believe in it, and that there's a relationship there. So like a large part of, I imagine what this thing will be is about, like just building relationships with like business people and startup people and trying to understand, well, how could the arts work with those people? How can we work with government? This group's been meeting a lot with Wellington City Council and the mayor and a bunch of other like people and people who work for council, and have had a really great time kind of chatting with all these people and going like, how do we help? How do the arts like actually help the government work more into itself, or kind of how can we can think laterally in a lot of different ways, and like that thinking if it can be clear in different systems is very useful.
That's exciting. I love that notion that you've centered your capacity building project and your innovation in an environment which is going to simultaneously build relationships where you may also be able to use those relationships to benefit other people. Lauren, tell us about your approach and your mission for Comedy Trust.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such a luxury to have capacity building funding and a real kind of gift at this time, I think, in a year that is all about disruption, whether we like it or not. I think by the nature of arts organisations everywhere in the world, but in New Zealand specifically, we are so focused on delivery all the time because resources are tight. And we have to focus on that delivery. A lot of us are producers. We're used to getting stuff done, Excel spreadsheets, action, solutions, tick the box, write a report, all of that stuff, budget balanced. And often you're running to deliver something, and then you've got the adrenaline of the event itself or the work, and then you've got the pack up afterwards. And then it's time to kind of start all again. And so it's very hard to fit the capacity building headspace into that. And so what I see capacity building is that thing that you just always want to do and you always want to get to, but it never quite happens in the mix of business as usual. And so we've been wanting to look at ways that we can address representation in the comedy industry. There's some wonderful representation, but is it completely representative of New Zealand and Aotearoa? No, I don't think it is. I think there's so much more. There's so many more stories that we want to hear. There's so many points of view and voices that aren't kind of getting mainstream attention, and that's awesome. That would be awesome. That's what I want to see. And so we've been kind of tapping away at that, different initiatives, working with different artists. But I feel like we needed to, we all got to a place, we were talking internally about, we wanted to do something, but do it properly, like really strip it back. Look at the trust itself, look at the internal team, our board, our representation through that. You know, there's a lot of unconscious bias there just to start with, you know. Comedy kind of started, I guess, from particularly kind of live comedy in New Zealand. There's that sort of sketch tradition and variety show tradition, and then there's the stand-up, which has sort of come more from the UK, maybe America a little bit. And so I guess a really sort of Pākehā kind of structure. So to analyse, I guess, how to open up your representation, you need to have a little bit of a look at the structure and go, wow, what is in the structure that may be unwelcoming, that we don't even realise, you know, don't even think about it because you're not coming from it from that perspective, or people don't even know what the trust is. People don't know what the comedy festival is. It hasn't come across their radar. We're quite city-based, you know, we're quite a Pākehā festival, and not totally, but more than we'd like, actually. So what we really wanted to do was a cultural representation research project where we really got to strip back, sit in some spaces and ask a lot of questions and do a lot of thinking. And that's been awesome, actually. So far, we've learned so much that I think you will learn in all of these kinds of projects, and that you have a plan and you have a structure, and you have and in this case, a very Pākehā approach. We've got our 3 structures, and we're going to do our CNZ report at the end, and we're going to have these strategies and these things. And we've been working with Bonnie and Dan at Tarima Vides and the team. And what's been amazing is letting Bonnie sort of navigate that process, kind of not necessarily lead in a way that like, come this way, you're following me, but in, hey, here's a question, I'm just gonna put it out there, and how are you gonna react to that? Or here's my weirdo, here's my challenge, you know. And so already we've got the board and the trust team together, and we've talked about what is comedy to different cultures. What is the comedy landscape? It's different than it was 25 years ago when the trust started, which was about creating a professional comedy industry. Well, we've kind of got that, which is awesome. But, you know, does that, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening online, and we're quite set up as a stage in a theatre or in a comedy venue, in a comedy club. So, you know, what do we need to think about as the trust? What is our role in the industry? What's our responsibility to the industry? And I guess a big question that's come out of it is, what is our koha? And that's still a question we're asking, and will be different to different people. And one of the, I think, really great things that Bonnie's touched on with us is that, you know, you have a gift, you have a koha, and you know, it's all very well going, come over here and get my gift, I've got this amazing gift for you, but actually you really need to take it out to people. And so for me, connecting, collaborating, widening who we are and what we see as comedy is really critical in this, and so that's been a really awesome, great position to kind of sit in that space and ask those questions. And the plan is changing all the time. You know, we have a session and then the plan changes again. We were starting out with a survey to sort of get a benchmark, but we really had to stop and work out what were the questions we wanted to ask. And so that's ended up not happening just yet, but will happen later in the process. So we're talking, focusing on one-on-one conversations and getting deeper into things, so that when we go out and ask the questions, we're asking what we need to ask and what to find out the information that we need.
So this is fundamental work, Lauren.
Yeah, it is. And did we think it would be quite maybe as fundamental at the beginning? Yes and no. What's been really cool with the board and the trust team is that we've uncovered all this awesome passion that we knew was there, but like we've stopped and looked at it and looked at the strategy and looked and questioned and thrown words up and challenged each other and all been in that space together, in a really safe space, with Bonnie and the Tarima Vibes team. And so that's been quite amazing because it has allowed us to kind of stop and have a bit of a look, and you realize the power of the people you have on your team, I think, when you do that. Yeah. Because you're not all trying to get to a target and a deadline, you're actually feeding in. And I think there's a couple of learnings, I think, around the team side of it that we've sort of done already, which is you really sort of need someone to focus in on the project. So you really need someone to kind of lead the project, to do the mahi around it and guide. And we've got Lauren Andrews on our team who's doing a fantastic work, that she can really sit in that. She's not distracted by lots of other things. And then we've got Bonnie as a navigator as well. So, and then I'm working really closely with Lauren. But we've brought all the team on the journey with us, and part of the discovery of that as well is that once you've got a passionate team on a journey with you, you need to keep them on the journey. You need to use them and embrace that. And so that's been really cool. So we've got more help than we maybe thought we would originally as well.
How did you know that you needed to have everyone, including all of the trustees, engaged in the process? It wasn't just something that management could do with a bit of advice.
I think we worked out pretty quick that that everyone had brought so much to it. Like in the first session that we had, there, you know, everybody brought a really interesting perspective and something fresh to the party. And I think that, you know, it's so important because at a management level, you're involved in a lot of conversations and you have a lot of ideas. But, you know, I've been at the trust for 11 years, so I'm sure I've got a lot of historical baggage or things that I automatically go, oh God, that's too hard, we've tried that, oh, you know, and so someone with a fresh perspective or asks again and goes, oh, why don't we do that? And you go, actually, it's a good point. Why don't we do that? It's because I put it in the too hard basket about 5 years ago and haven't thought about it for a while. but you know, and because things are constantly changing and evolving, you do have to ask those questions. You know, things that were challenging 5 years ago are completely different. You know, like trying to do stuff online 5 years ago versus now, you know, it's a completely different environment. And so it's really, really important. Also, it brings a wider range of experiences and ages, you know, like having younger people come through and fresh ideas and perspectives, and, you know, because you just sort of forget how, even though you think you're innovative and fresh, maybe sometimes you're kind of like, you know, older than you think. But you know, so it's amazing to see that, I guess, and also perceptions, you know, like it's really easy to think that, like, you know, it's really easy for me to think that everyone thinks about the trust in a certain way, and then when people ask questions, you're like, oh, if you think that and you're connected with the trust, then what does the industry think, you know? So these are super healthy conversations to have, and it can be hard to have those when you're in the midst of delivering, and because it's a different mindset. You have to be okay with not being able to go through track and through in the same ways that you usually do.
Did you, being at the trust for so long, for 12 years, did you enter into this process with a sense that you already knew the answers and then had to learn to listen, or did you go into it going, wow, this could be new territory?
Yeah, luckily it's the second. Even though I talk a lot, I am quite good at listening. But no, I knew that we hadn't cracked it. You know, like I knew that there's so much stuff that we could do, but we just need to be actually talking to people who know that space, are in those communities. I just, you know, I know that I'm not in all of those communities, and I can't be physically, you know, so it's really important to actually, I guess, work out who are connected to those communities, and then we can grow our whānau as well, which is awesome.
So I can see a real relationship with the way that Jean and the crew is approaching it in Pōneke, by centering themselves in a business environment and developing relationships. You're also, through your one-on-one interviews and immersing yourself in community, developing relationships, so that the vision of a more participatory, more diverse, more representative set of culture, many cultures, as part of the comedy world in New Zealand, will happen through the process of the connection. So you achieve what you're trying to achieve while you work out what you're trying to achieve.
And that's actually been the beauty of it. You know, we've had conversations with the Basement Theatre already that are like, oh, game changing, you know, and collaboration is absolutely the key in New Zealand, across the world. But, you know, here we are all learning this stuff, and it can completely all help each other, because it's really valuable. You know, like I think if you sort of put some top line learnings of what we've already learned in this project, it would completely be useful to other people who are embarking on something they haven't done before, or they're trying to find out. Because by the nature of research, you need to sort of approach it to be able to evolve with what you discover, I guess.
Could you write that? Could you write that as a story, and would someone clever be able to make it funny?
Well, hopefully I'll be able to put a few zingers in there myself, you know. But yeah, I think you could. I think you certainly can work with such a range of people and meet people that will completely change your perspective on things. And as I say, there's so much you know that you don't know, and so just in all of these one-on-one conversations, it's been so fascinating to think of all the ideas bubbling up. And it's, you know, I think the other thing that capacity building does is it allows you to get your head in a different space, which is less about delivery. It's more about understanding and empathy for others, but also understanding yourself and what your needs are and where your weaknesses are.
Right.
And so I think it puts you in a different working space, and I think that's so healthy, because I just feel like we're all running all the time, and to be able to take a step back and approach a project, it kind of brings a lot of passion to the surface, which is really nice, you know, because sometimes you get in a bit of a repeat pattern, right? And so that passion and the feel like you can make a change and make some difference is pretty cool.
Great. Dan, do you feel the same? Do you feel like when you enter these processes that you're learning as much about yourself as you are about the direction you're trying to go in?
I do, yeah. It's funny that thank you, Lauren, for those lovely words about Torima. I'm glad those workshops were useful. I think I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about where to kind of start on in terms of talking about the work that Torima does. We are a team of 6 now. I got that number wrong. We are now a team of 6 artists. We all come from artist backgrounds. We all come from our own kind of creative practices. For me specifically, I come from a mental health background. And so that is the sector and industry in itself that has a very codified system of language. And I would say that that's very much the root of the work that Torima does. Essentially, our work is systematic. Absolutely, when I came onto the team 4 years ago now, I believe I was very dead set in my mentality and my ideology about approaching work, about how I approach work, and especially making theatre around mental health, how that process should be conducted. I was very specific, and it was quite an isolated process for me. And I think that's the thing. I think that's the thing about systems. They allow us to make assumptions about the work that we make in order to make it faster and make it easier. That's the idea behind it. The issue being that if you streamline the process to such an extent, and especially such an isolated process as making creative works often is, in any capacity, I think what can happen is we forget to find those moments to come together and talk to each other in the very onset of making work. You know, we meet each other with a very specific idea about what we do, what the other person does, and how we are going to work together. And sometimes what we miss, especially when we come into work from different backgrounds, is an opportunity to check in and settle with each other, essentially, which sounds, I think, deceptively simple, but is actually a process and a skill that we don't learn, and we're often not taught as creatives. And so, yeah, that capacity is where a lot of Torima's work begins. It's where a lot of our work begins, and where a lot of the specific kind of channels, whether that's Fringe or the Wellness Resource, or Torima, the specific workshops that we run with specific groups, that idea of coming together and taking time for each other. Yeah, that's the basis of a lot of the work that we do.
Is it the launch pad? Does everything start from who am I? How am I feeling? What am I going to contribute? That sense, is it? Grounding. It's a grounding, is it?
Absolutely. A lot of the work that we do is around language, I would say. So we bring groups together, and often in the beginning of the processes that we lead or are invited into, there's often a sense of frustration, I would say. It's and including from myself in the beginning, there is a frustration at the idea of coming together with each other in a whakato or a cast and crew meeting, and there's a frustration at the idea of taking things too slowly to come together and listen and check in with each other. And in challenging that a little bit, and in asking people to come into spaces and follow that process, you can get some really surprising responses, I think, from communities in terms of the expectations and the assumptions that you didn't even know that you were making, especially around language, especially in a country that is as diverse as New Zealand is. and especially in an industry that is really only just becoming aware of the systemic racism that is kind of embedded in so many of those systems, the isolation that's embedded in a lot of our systems, ableism, homophobia, all of, and these things are embedded as part of the systems, as part of the ways that we work. And unless we take the time to stop and address those and realize that we're on a different kind of page than the people around us that we're working with, those issues are never addressed and those conversations never happen.
How do people cope? This sound, for some people it might be hugely empowering and an opportunity to speak in a slower, a deeper place, and for other people it might be really scary.
So that kind of ideology, I suppose, is the basis for all of the work that Torima does. So over the years, we have run different festival spaces with different specific focuses for specific communities. The festival that we're looking after now, I suppose, is Fringe Festival, which can be a very intense, very fast-paced, and very lonely process for a lot of people. So we definitely try to focus that sense of community alongside Fringe as well at the moment. And then in response to COVID as well, that a defining feature of 2020, we essentially realized that there is no collective resource either for artists as a whole in New Zealand to focus on their well-being or explore some of their experiences around health and mental health and community engagement in regards to the work that they're doing. And so that is also our main kind of focus right now. We're in the research phase of an online wellbeing resource, Te Whakawhare Ngāki Kete, which is we are currently in the process of gathering feedback from our communities in terms of what they would like to see in terms of a wellness resource. And hopefully when that kind of comes to fruition, it will serve as kind of a collective hub for communities to engage with one another based off of the needs that they feel like they have and want to talk about.
So a place for referral and also a place for accessing tools, or is it also a community where people can connect with each other, or do you not know yet?
We don't know for sure yet, but we're hoping both. Again, a lot of going back to that kind of idea that a lot of the work that we do is systemic. A lot of the health resources that people can access online now follow this structure, which I'm sure you'll know if you've ever been through a DHB website, where you type something into Google, you go onto a website based off of whatever ailments you want to explore or seek support for, and essentially you kind of go down this rabbit hole of links that kind of divides further and further and further, and it creates this fractured kind of experience of seeking help. The idea of a one-stop shop for health support is something that different communities have kind of asked for and reached out for and has never really been available. So that is the experience that we are trying to cultivate, that having the information that you need available in one space, and in a space where the presence of other people can be felt, where that connection is present.
Great, Dan. Yeah, I mean, for just the surviving the challenges of being a creative person, and all the things that brings up for an individual, and the challenges of working with peers and all those things, it's going to be wonderful for that. But also, of course, some people struggle significantly, and we've lost colleagues in the sector, which has been heartbreaking for everyone. So this sounds powerful and essential. And it's really interesting that we're now talking about a set of tools, a place, a community, a way to access information, to stay safe, to grow, to look after each other, which will be a generous capacity building element for the whole sector. Is there anything else like it anywhere else in the world?
There are variants. It's the sort of tools, it's a set of tools that we're hoping, or that will be culturally specific. So there are similar kind of cultural variants in different places. I know Canada has a few resources there available for artists that we're kind of basing some of our research off as well. But yeah, right now we're in that process of talking to the communities and seeking advice on what people actually want to see from a resource, so that we can kind of let the community lead that process.
Yeah, great. And Jean, the wonderful work that you're doing, have you thought through how it might be available for other people to access for their own practice?
Yeah, there's definitely part of the process, or part of the program is set aside to kind of have a toolkit of, like, there would be, I imagine, an online kind of toolkit that would be available to really anybody in the country, or probably in the world. But that would look at, like, yeah, some basic sort of, that's more of like, yeah, like your business plans, or your one pagers, or your budgeting templates, or I don't know, different process kind of, I guess, like different sort of short, quick fire process stuff that you can put into a one pager of sorts. And that's definitely part of it. The other part is that we're really looking at it making entrenched in the program is that it's a reciprocal kind of thing, or it's not a reciprocal, it's a kind of snake eating its tail kind of thing, where those that are involved keep coming back and keep, like, so that we're obviously envisioning the program to last for several years, but that those, like, kind of graduates would keep being involved in it, as well as, like, those that are working on it might then come back and do it at some point in time, and that it's not it's a kind of program that's sort of available for anybody, and it's not really like, oh, you need to be not knowing what you're doing in such a way to do it. It's like at any point in time that you want to try to reimagine something or develop anything, it can always be part of it. So yeah, there's that, and then there's a high-end kind of advocacy stuff that's come out of it. Like I said, we've been meeting the group of independent arts practitioners, Joe, HJ, Claire, and Mel, and I. We've been meeting with a lot of different people because of coming together to work on this thing. And so, like, the goal is then that we, without being too formal, or about allowing the group to be adaptive to what it wants to do, but like these kinds of groups will form and our group will grow. It's like we're met some amazing people, visual artists and programmers and whatnot that we wouldn't really have access to, so that then we can kind of build, strengthen the community in that way, as well as within the advocacy groups and networks will expand and start to become more solidified or unified in ways.
Yeah, but I can see that in addition to sharing with each other and becoming a collective voice for advocacy. So if there are things that need to change in the community that are beyond the capability of just an individual group in a market, then you can push for that. But if you are, when you are successful, when there are success stories, it's probably the lead by example. That's going to be the most powerful thing, because it's like cutting a pathway and other people can follow.
Yeah, and I think, like, with what, like, Lauren was saying as well, and then also what Dan was saying, it's like the program itself is trying to be designed. It's not really on the leadership, on the pathway thing, but like the program itself is trying to be designed to where it's a reciprocal process. So it's like those running the program are learning as much from the participants, and that there's like, trying to really shape the culture of the learning so that it can be kind of flow away, or like at least back and forth, so that there's then changing, that way, kind of leading in that example, so that then we can kind of change our own kind of communities to perhaps move out of the trap of contestable funding, where we inevitably become very competitive, and even just our subconscious or like and sort of looking at each other as like, yes, my dear friend that I went to drama school with, who's also my enemy when it comes to
A frenemy.
yeah.
It's not a frenemy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jane. And Lauren, so if you were to be sharing what you've learned as a trust, would the culture of how you approached it be part of the story?
Yeah, I think Dan touched on it as well when he talked about the way we use language. And it's so easy to think, of course, that makes total sense, but we've really discovered and unpacked the ways in which we're using language and how that can affect and be responded to. And so there's definitely tools and approaches and things that we've learned on the way that I think could be a really easy way that you could approach multiple projects. And I really think that, sitting in the space, really connecting one-on-one, all of that sort of stuff, but also bringing your team together. So starting with yourself first and looking internally, whether that be a person or a team, and coming together and settling. And that settling is, I think, a really critical part of the process, because if you're unsettled, you're not going to relax in the space, and you're not going to be open to ideas and listening. You're going to kind of go in with your thoughts and try and get that across. And I think being able to sit and settle means you're open up a lot. So there's a lot of stuff around those kind of tools and stuff that I would recommend, and then be very happy to always talk through and sit down for a coffee and chat about. And I think the nature of this project is that it will be ongoing, and we're sort of starting off with a seed, and hopefully it will grow and flourish into a whole forest. But it's all about connecting and collaborating, and I don't see this as going in just finding more, stand-up comedians. It's about broadening what the whole landscape is for comedy. For us, I think it's really going, who's in the theatre space that's doing fascinating stuff, who's on Instagram doing cool stuff that, is making people laugh. How can we bring people into that space? What can we offer them? How can we build a community for them? How can we build connections into broadcasting onto the stage? It could be that we're working more in the dance space, and but there's comedy and looking at the way different cultures approach comedy. I think there's a lot of learning that will benefit comedy, but also the wider arts. And already the connections that and the conversations that we're having, I talk to some people quite a lot, but actually sitting down and spending quality time kind of talking specifically about this idea is really valuable.
It sounds to me like this is one of those projects that when you've finished it, you'll just be at the beginning.
Yes, exactly. And to be comfortable with that, I think that's the hardest bit, right? Because we're a group of producers or people that so we're used to having an end and a thing to achieve, and when you do all this hard work, you don't want to be at the beginning of a project. What the hell? So it's really important that we're like, that this is the excitement of we're building a foundation, and this foundation, who knows what can grow out of it. That's the exciting bit, and to be excited about that as an achievement, to be able to be at the beginning again, because sometimes being at the beginning is very uncomfortable. Being in the unknown is very uncomfortable. Do you feel like you're achieving, I've sat down and talked to this person for an hour and a half. Well, I didn't send 10 emails in that time, like you feel the guilt of that. So it's been such a luxury to be able to sit in that space and focus and think, and, for ideas to pop up. And I think that's, I guess, what I think has been such a wonderful benefit.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous. And we're hearing, the power of Taurima vibes here, Dan. Nice work. See that big smile on Lauren's face. So it must be really a wonderful position for you at the moment to be able to get a glimpse into a number of organisations which have got the bravery to slow down and then communicate and grow. So do you think we're actually, with an overview, do you think we're in an exciting time where there is going to be a lot more strength developing in the arts sector?
I do. I really do. The privilege of my kind of position, of our position, I suppose, is that we work nationally, and we work with a lot of groups, and we only work with spaces that we're invited into. So the people that we work with have essentially asked us to be there, and to kind of guide and hold this process that they're maybe sometimes uncertain about or don't know what it kind of involves. And yeah, it's a real privilege and a luxury to be able to see that process from the beginning, where you sometimes do get people who have been doing these jobs for such a long time, and there's this sense of, cool, what are we doing? You know, I have to be active, I have to be constantly like pushing at it. And it's nice to be a part of a process that is about creating space and opening up to say, actually, we can slow down, we have time, and we have resources. And actually, the idea that we need to produce something, or we need to deliver something, we need to create something, or find a skill or a resource or a project that we don't already have. Actually, part of the benefit of the work that Torima does is that the people who come into that space already have all of the tools and knowledge that they need. The kind of shift that happens is just a mindset and a perspective. And again, that systemic space of, actually, no, we can slow down, we have time, and oh yeah, this is a community. We are a community of people who are on the same team as each other. And that's kind of why a lot of us got into this kind of work in the first place. Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Such an encouraging thing to say to the sector. You have the knowledge already, you have all the answers, you need the time and the resources to slow down and to let it develop, and you need to go through a process of connecting, opening your hearts. And as Lauren was saying, bring the whole community, the whole organization around it. You know, and Jean's got a partnership with, well, I think it was up to 10 organizations and embedded in the business environment in Wellington. So thank you, all three of you, for those wonderful insights. Really different approaches, which I think is really helpful for organizations out there. It's pretty strange, Dan, to hear you say, you know, time, resources, that's something that artists actually aren't used to. So if we can, you know, look on the bright side, silver lining stuff, and end up in this COVID, huge COVID disruption with time to do that, then that is a great outcome, and something the sector needs to really grab for the chance to build back better and all those other pieces of language. Does anybody want to make any last comments? Oh, you've been awesome. Thanks so much. Ka kite, everyone out there.